Adele, Rolling in the Deep, one of the top songwriters of the past year or so. We have in the studio not only a songwriter, an entrepreneur, a manager, a guy who's been in the music business for many years, and I don't want to sort of say that you're getting old and ancient or anything, but you have been in...
Listen, I was in Sydney last year, and they call me a relic of the 60s.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
That sounds like something you'd sell on eBay. Any offers?
I'm always in awe of people who were around in the 60s. Simon Napier, Bella, everybody, is here. And you've been manager of Wham, the Yardbirds, countless other acts as well. And there's not much you don't know about the music industry, is there?
Well, probably is, but I don't know it, so that's all right. So I'll let you think I know it all.
That's a good way of doing it. So since the 60s, how did you get into the music business in the first place?
Self-interest, fun, laziness. I was in the film business, and I used to go out every night clubbing to the Ad Lib or Scottish St James or whichever clubs were trendy at the time. And I noticed that when I went off home at 3 o'clock because I needed a bit of sleep before I went to the film studios, a lot of people stayed. And I used to say to them, "How come you can stay later than 3?" And they said, "Oh, we're in the music business." So I said, "Oh, I think I'll go into that. That sounds good."
Backstage fun.
That sounds like good fun, yeah. It sounds like an easy job, but it's not an easy job, is it?
Well, it is. Even today, it is one of those jobs where you can stay up late and get pissed and misbehave and never do any work and still end up making a fortune.
Yeah. You managed the Yardbirds, and you kind of like invented rock, or you claim to have invented the word.
I didn't claim to invent rock.
I saw it.
What I said was that the Yardbirds were the first group which had the word rock used about them, which wasn't me. It was an American music critic whose name I've completely forgotten at the moment. And in a piece he wrote about their first album, he used the word rock and heavy metal.
But before that was always rock and roll, wasn't it?
Rock didn't come into 1967. You got to remember, rock. I wrote the other day about this. I was at the New Musical Express Award winners concert at Wembley in 1965, and the top groups on the bill were the Beatles, the Stones, the Yardbirds, the Who, the Kinks. It was just everybody. And none of those groups were called rock groups. They were called beat groups. And after beat groups, the word pop came in. So pop was newer and trendier than beat. And then rock didn't come in until 1967. And most of these groups who then called themselves rock groups, like The Who, only 2 years ago had been eagerly trying to get people to call them pop groups instead of beat groups. So rock was the end of an evolution, but it was something different. And the Yardbirds really did create the music. It was that riff, it was the idea of taking blues, and then instead of making them very heavy, when they played blues music, but actually what the Yardbirds did, they played blues music complete with a harmonica. You used to say Muddy Waters riffs, and Keith Relf played a harmonica. What Zeppelin did, which was what the Yardbirds transitioned into... Because
Jimmy Page was in the Yardbirds, and Jeff Beck.
I put Jimmy Page in the Yardbirds. What he started to do was take that harmonica riff and play it on guitar and double it on the bass guitar. And so suddenly this very bluesy feel became a very harsh, hard feel. And so that's really Zeppelin's music. But it evolved, and the image of rock really didn't come from the Yardbirds. So the image of rock came from the Rolling Stones. The image of rock was really invented by Andrew Oldham, who was the Stones manager, who taught them to be totally antisocial, tell journalists to piss off, and not talk to them, and did everything they could possibly do to be rude to people. So the imagery came from the Stones, the music came from the Yardbirds, and the group which really put it together magnificently was Zeppelin. Yeah.
But then that's New Musical Express poll winners party.
It was a very funny concert.
You had a real coup, didn't you?
Well, yeah, it was very funny because Andrew Oldham, who's a bloody-minded guy, and quite right, managers should be bloody-minded, and that was the image he was creating the Stones in, bloody-mindedness. So at the year before's concert, which they were also on, he'd refused to let them be televised. There wasn't any real good reason. He just thought, right, you can't televise the Stones. And so Brian Epstein, who really didn't know much about what he was doing as a manager, in this following year thought, well, I better do that too, so I look like a good tough manager. So he said, you can't televise the Beatles. So that meant the Yardbirds, who were third from the top, became the last group on the show for television viewers. So as far as 50 million people in England were concerned, the Yardbirds topped the bill. So everyone said, God, you're a clever manager. Well, actually, I didn't do too much.
I remember watching those when I was a kid, and they were amazing to see all those bands playing live like that.
Well, can you imagine a bill where the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, the Yardbirds and the Who are on? But so is Dave, Dozy, Mickey, what are they?
And Mickey and Titch.
And Herman Service.
Amazing.
This is all on the same bill. People didn't think about rock. It was all pop groups.
Yeah, absolutely. Then in the, I suppose, what did you do in the 70s then? Because there was
I went for a holiday, I think.
Not a lot happened for you in the 70s, did it?
Yeah, quite a lot happened. I managed Japan, which was a long slog. It took 5 years to get them from first signing.
But they were more of an 80s band, weren't they?
Well, that's because it took so long. I signed them in 76.
Yeah.
Took 4 years to get a hit, except in Japan. I broke them in Japan. We were huge in Japan. They went to Japan in 1977, and the biggest gig they'd ever played before they went to Japan was 3 days earlier in the Red Lion pub in Hammersmith, which holds 120 people and wasn't even full.
Yeah.
And that was on a Wednesday night, and on the Saturday they played Budokan in Tokyo for 25.
You must have seen something in them that, made you want to sort of,
Oh, they were brilliant. You can, but the problem is, there's two things to being a manager or a clever entrepreneur: being able to spot star quality, and star quality in music and in image, and being able to spot the moment it's going to happen. I can
timing.
I nearly always can spot star quality, but I've never been very good at timing. So I got it right with Japan. It was just I was 5 years out.
Yeah.
Come on, get up, get out, and start grooving. Jumping around to the sound of music.
Now, Wham! How did you get involved with George Michael?
I had decided I'd give up management after Japan. I finally broke Japan after those 5 or 6 years, and they became probably the biggest and most influential group in the UK in 1982, 83. Went on to have huge influence.
Well, I was talking about this earlier, that I was part of the scene behind the scenes, and I went on to that tour, and it was like Beatlemania.
Oh, well, Wham came along, but before Wham, Japan had become the most influential group in the UK. Think about it. Gary Newman stole David Sylvian's voice. Duran Duran stole David Sylvian's hairstyle, and all 5 of them made themselves look like him. Paul Young stole Mick Karn's bass to make his hits. Everybody stole Rich Barbariera's sort of keyboard style, this sort of sparse Asiatic style. It was extraordinary. They became huge, but when they broke up, I just thought, I don't want to do that. And also, I really wanted to come and live in Asia. So I told everybody I wasn't going to go on the management, and then I got a knock on the door one day, and it was a guy called Jazz Summers, who has also had a group which had blown up. They were called Blue Zoo. They hadn't been as big as Japan, but he was pretty experienced. And he said, look, if we got together as a team, it'd be brilliant, and I'd do all the work. You could just use your name to help me get things done. And I said, well, it's fine, but, it wouldn't work. I'd have to do half the work. It wouldn't be interesting sitting around doing nothing, and I don't really want to do it. But he persuaded me. So we made a list of all the acts we thought would really be worth working with. Not new acts. We wanted acts which were halfway there. Boy George and Human League. And
this must have been, 1982, something like that?
82, 83. And we went through them one by one, trying to steal them, quite frankly, away from their managers. And then we got to Wham. We thought, well, really, this is, of all that list, this is the group. And we had some contacts who knew them, and they weren't actually being managed properly. They were being looked after by their lawyer, who didn't know anything at all about management. He was a good lawyer. And they came to see us, and it was very interesting. They came around my house, and I'd had a book, just about then I'd had my first book out, which is called You Don't Have to Say You Love Me, which is a book about the 60s, and it was mainly about, having sex, drugs and rock and roll 60s style. There wasn't much about music.
Which I missed, and
well, I'll give you the book. But there wasn't much about music or management or clever business in it. It was just about degenerate behaviour.
Sure. And
George sat there saying to me, now, what have you done? How would you organise this? What would you do about the money? How would you structure the business etiquette? And while he was saying that, Andrew picked up the book and browsed through it, and he said, wow, this is the manager for us. So that was it.
Yeah. And we'll come back to You Don't Have to Say You Love Me in a moment or two, because that was such a classic record. But I'm interested in knowing how you took Wham into China, because that was a big thing, wasn't it? They were the first band, weren't they?
They were the first Western band ever to play in China. I mean, the Chinese absolutely did not want youth culture to infiltrate into China. The first dinner Jazz Summers and I had with Wham, we had to discuss, what were we going to do for the next 2 years? And George was adamant. He said, we want to be the biggest group in the world 1 year from now. Well, he was like that. And and I said, well, the biggest group in the world means the biggest group in America. You can't have one without the other. And the only way to break America is to go there and tour, and then you tour again bigger, and you tour again bigger, and it takes at least 4 years. No one's ever done it any other way, ever. Even the Beatles had to go and tour 2 or 3 times. And he said, well, I'm not doing that. So I said, and the other thing is, I said, you've got to, in that tour, you've got to go meet producers and DJs and push yourself and get up early and go to shops. He said, I'm not doing that either. So I think it was Jazz said, well, maybe we should make you the first group ever to play in China. And George said, yes, I like that. Go and do that.
Just like that.
But I was in love with Asia, you see. So I said to Jazz, well, I think I can fix that. I didn't think I could fix it. I thought I was going to go off licking in Asia, which is what I did. So 3 days later, I got on a plane to Thailand, not to China. Had a nice weekend in Pattaya.
Yeah.
Flew up to China, sat in the Holiday Inn in midwinter, freezing cold, wind chill. It was 20 below zero and a wind chill of 50 below zero.
Yeah.
I thought, what the bloody hell do I do? You know, I'm going to get whammed into China. I mean, who can give permission for that? Probably only President Deng, nobody else.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do. So I called the British Embassy. And they sent round a book which had a list of all the, in English, of all the ministries in China and all the people who worked in them. And I sat there in the Holiday Inn, and this is the days of old-fashioned phones where you stuck your finger in a little hole.
Sure, yeah.
And
no emails or anything like that.
I called as many as I could in a day. And the trick was nothing more than to find somebody at each number who spoke English. I mean, you were probably talking to the cleaner in half the occasions. And I said to each one, tell the minister that Simon Napier Bell has come to Beijing to have lunch with him.
Yeah.
And after that, I thought I'd do this for a week and wait, but after the second day, I got so fed up, I came back to Pattaya and then came home and told everybody I'd spent miserable 2 weeks in Beijing, which isn't quite true, 2 days. And then the next month, I said, it's time to go back. So I went back to Pattaya, and by then I found there was a nice round-the-world ticket, first class. I could fly to Bangkok, Beijing, Mexico, and home. So I spent a week in Pattaya, 2 days in Beijing, a week in Acapulco, and I got home exhausted from my tiring 3 weeks.
What a difficult job.
Tiring 3 weeks with the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And when I got back to China, at Beijing, I did the same thing again. And I got my first taker. I got a message. Mr. Ching Mo Si would like to come and see you and have lunch. and so he arrived in a Mao suit, because this was...
Were you not scared?
China's changed like you wouldn't
believe. Did it not scare you, the whole thing?
No, I was being funny in Pattaya. China's changed like you wouldn't believe. I mean, this is 25 years ago. Everybody wore Mao suits. Makeup was forbidden. No Chinese could speak to foreigners in public. Yeah. This is the minister, and he arrives in a Mao suit on a bicycle, and he comes to the hotel lobby taking off his bicycle clips. And he says, hello, I'm Ho Chi Si, Minister of Energy. Very pleased to meet you. Very pleased to talk about buying coal from Jinqing.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I'm not here to buy coal. I'm here about something quite different. And he got the wrong person. But I thought, well, not to be churlish, I've got a minister with me, so I'll buy him lunch anyway. So he had a translator, and we had lunch, and I told him what I was doing. And he said, oh, you'll be so successful, he said, because ministers love good food, and we're not allowed to go to Western restaurants because we're not allowed to spend dollars.
Yeah.
And this hotel's got the only Western restaurant in Beijing. So you're going to do really well. I'll bring some more people next time. So 1 month later, I came back, and he had 3 ministers with him. No one who could help me with Wham, but 3 greedy ministers and their translators. And bit by bit, over the next 18 months, I got up to about 30 ministers, which is 2/3 of the entire cabinet, all having lunch with me once a month. Yeah. And bit by bit, I put the idea in their head that perhaps if they wanted to go on eating, they needed to get Wham to come to China.
Well, it was a major coup, wasn't it? Because it was the publicity you got from that was unbelievable. And we'll talk some more about that in a moment. But here's Wham and Freedom, one of their big hits from that period.